Alright, and then finally we have dividing. So how do we divide fractions? So if you remember, way back in like 5th grade, when you're dividing by a fraction, you're multiplying by its reciprocal. So you might have learned KFC, which means you keep the first one the same. When you're dividing, you multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to flip this one around, 11 over 3, and we're going to change the sign to a multiplication. So keep, flip, change. And then we still do top, top, bottom, bottom. So this time, that's an 11 there. When I do top, top, I get 44 here. I do bottom, bottom, I get 21. So the only difference for dividing is you have to flip it around first, and then you multiply across. So then you multiply numerators and denominators. Okay, so again, when it's a whole number, we change it to a fraction. We keep the first fraction the same, negative 3 over 2. We flip the second fraction to 1 over 5, and then we multiply them together. So we get negative 3 over 10. And again, sometimes when it's a negative, they'll just write it as negative 3/10 with the negative in the very front. Again, check if you can reduce it. Here I can't, here I can't. This one I might be able to, but let's check. So we keep the first one, 4 over 3. We flip the second one, 5 over 6, and you multiply. So you flip the one that's being divided. So usually it's the second one, but if there's like multiple ones, if they're being divided, those flip as well. So you flip the one that's after the division sign. Okay, so when we multiply numerators, we get 20 over 18. And you ask yourself, what can I divide both of these by? Well, it looks like I can divide both of them by 2. Is that the biggest? I believe so. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So this one would just be 10/9. So again, pretty much the same things as before, but the only difference here is you multiply. Or sorry, you flip first. So now we're putting it together. We're flipping, then we're multiplying, and then we're reducing if possible. So the rule is you flip the second fraction and you multiply together. So keep the first one the same, flip the second one, and then change the sign. KFC. Keep the first one, flip the second one, and then change the sign to multiply. So top, top gives us AD, bottom, bottom gives us BC. Okay, so now how does it work with our rationals? So this one's already factored for us. For the other ones, just like before, we're going to use the x. But here, we're going to keep the first one the same. 3 over 2 times x plus 7. We're going to flip the second one. So this one goes to the top, x plus 7. This one goes to the bottom, x minus 1. Or sorry, these go to the top, and then this one goes to the bottom, 8x times x minus 1. And then we're going to multiply these together. So look at everything in the top, so I can rewrite it over here. 3x plus 7, x minus 1. Everything in the bottom. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 8x because they're both in front and make it 16x. X plus 7 and x minus 1. So again, before I start canceling stuff out, the excluded values. So these two are easy. This one would be a -7. This one would be a +1. But for this x that's by itself, it's not a factor. If we set that equal to 0, divide by 16, 0 divided by 16 is just 0. So this one is 0. That's all reducing is, setting it equal to 0 and then solving. So now we can start canceling. X plus 7 go away. X minus 1 go away. So it's just these two left over. 3 over 16x. And I can't reduce. 3 over 16 doesn't reduce, so I just leave it that way. Okay, so again, very similar to what we've been doing. You just have to remember to flip it first. We have a couple more examples like that. And for this one, we're going to have to use the x for a couple of these. Okay, so for the first fraction, if I make an x for the top part here, -16, there is no middle term. That means it has to be a 0. So what are the factors of -16 that go to 0? Well, I want them to be the same, 4 and 4. Just one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So this is a difference of squares. Difference of squares always factors into plus, minus, and you just take the square root. So square root of 16 is 4 and 4. Okay, so that's the top part. The bottom part's already factored for us. So the 12 is already in front. X plus 3. Can't factor any further. But now I need, since we're dividing, I need to flip this one around. So here, I'm going to multiply, so I'm going to change the sign, and then I'm going to flip it. So this part is going to go to the bottom. X minus 8, X minus 4, and then this one stays in, or goes to the numerator. So here I'm going to make an X for this one. -18 to get -3. -18, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. With 3 being the bigger one being the negative. So 3 is positive. So the denominator here, which ends up being the numerator up here, is x plus 3. Put that in green here, red. X plus 3, x minus 6. So I'm multiplying. I look at everything in the top and everything in the bottom together. So before we cancel, for this one, we don't care about this one because it doesn't have an x with it. With this one, it's -3. With this one, it was a +8. And with this one, it was a +4. Now here's where it's a little tricky, because if you remember, this one was on the bottom to begin with. This one was this one right here. So I actually need to account for this one as well. So the +3 is already there as the -3. The -6, I also need to add a +6 here, because it was originally on the bottom. Anytime it's on the bottom, it has to be excluded. Okay, so now we can cancel. +3 plus 3, -4 minus 4. Anything else? I think that's it. So the reduced form for this one is all the stuff that's left over. X plus 4, X minus 6, over 12 here, and an X minus 8 there. So you don't have to multiply it back out. Just leave all the binomials together. Okay. And we have this last dividing one. I think we'll skip that one. We'll just end with number 12 here. Ooh, this one has a lot of x's. So look at your practice page for this one, how to set up the x's. I don't think I'm going to have enough room to do the x's and write them all out. So divided by this thing. So if you look at your warm-up sheet, this was the 20 on the bottom and the negative 9 on the top. So for 20 on the bottom and negative 9 on the top, should have been negative 4 and negative 5. 21 on the bottom and 10 on the top. 21 on the bottom and 10 on the top is 7 and 3, or 3 and 7, with both being positives. And then negative 12 on the bottom and negative 1 on the top. There's a 3 and a 4. And make sure you get the signs correct this time. The bigger one needs to be the negative, and then the 3 is the positive, because we're going to need it to cancel out. Alright, and this one's actually the exact same as this one. 21 on the bottom and 10 on the top is still plus 3 plus 7. Okay, before you start flipping around and canceling out, what can x not be here? So for both of these, x can't be negative 3. And for both of these, x can't be negative 7. So let's go ahead and copy these down. This stays, so it's going to stay up here. The first fraction stays normal. This one's going to stay x plus 7, or x plus 3, x plus 7. This is the one that flips though. So when we flip this one around, now we're going to change it to multiply. That means this part's going to go to the top, x plus 3, x plus 7. And this part goes to the bottom, x plus 3, x minus 4. So now when I do that, I got to see, is there anything I need to add? So that's still negative 3, that's still negative 7, that's negative 3. But notice here, I need the opposite of this one, and I need to add a positive 4. So now we can cancel. Plus 3 plus 3, plus 7 plus 7, minus 4 minus 4. So notice the plus 3, it's only going to cancel out with one of them, not both. So here I'm left with x minus 5 on the top, and an x plus 3 on the bottom. You can put the parentheses if you want, but you don't have to. Alright, so that's your reduced form there. For the last one, I'm not going to do number 13, but if you want to try it, the answer for this one should be negative 15. But it's the same, it's pretty much the same things. You're multiplying by the reciprocal, so you flip it around, and then you divide it away. Alright. Real quick, for the last one, there is something I want to mention. You're going to see this quite a bit on the homework. For this fraction right here, this numerator, this one's not a basic or an AC or a difference of squares. This one's a GCF one. So you got to ask yourself, when there's not a squared, you got to ask yourself, what can I divide both of these by? And usually we want the x to be by itself. So you're going to divide both of these by negative 3 to get rid of the x in the front. So if I divide this by negative 3, this goes away. If I divide this one by negative 3, I get -7. So you're going to see that a lot on the homework. So there's not a squared, it's a GCF problem. And you just see what you can divide out. What's the biggest thing you can divide from both of them? And then cancel out the common ones. Okay.